John, how long should this rebuild realistically take? Because, as you know, you live here, it is just a brutal, brutal product. And we'll get into the Avila stuff next. But is this taking way longer than it should?
Well, it's a fair question, Stoney. I do think a couple things. Number one, the rebuild, and I know Chris Bukowski made this point, and I think it's correct. The rebuild didn't really start until they traded Verlander and Upton in 2017. So even though 2014 was the last playoff year, it wasn't as though they started the rebuild after that because, of course, they went out and signed Zimmerman and Upton not long after that. So this team was still going for it nominally up until midway through 2017. And so I think it's important to make that point. And if you want to say, okay, is it a 5-year plan? Well, if it's 5 years, that's the middle of next year. You're supposed to be good. And I'm not candidly seeing that happen yet. I think that we would all probably join in that assessment. Yes. I mean, there have been some bright spots. Boyd, of course, goes today, and I think he's really done a tremendous job, I think, bouncing back. And I really am impressed by Matthew, as I always am. He's a great person on and off the field. But I think, Stoney, that it's not – if you're looking for signs, if you're a Tiger fan looking for a sign that next year you can start thinking about the playoffs, I don't believe we've seen that yet. And I really think there are some important days to come about, okay, how good do you expect Mize to be? How good do you expect Skubal to be? How good do you expect Manning once he gets there to be? Because it's interesting, guys. What we're seeing elsewhere, Jared Kelenic getting called up this week by the Mariners. And obviously, hindsight's 2020. I'm not suggesting in any way that the Tigers should have drafted him number 1 overall. No one was saying that. But the point is that he's a pretty young guy, and he's already in the major leagues. And if you look at the ages of the players, this has become such a young person's sport. And I really think that sometimes we say, okay, well, let's wait on this player and wait on him. This is not really a wait on him kind of era in the game. This is an era where young players like Kelenic come up and are expected to make an impact. And I think that as a result, even with that lost year last year, the time for Torkelson and Green and Mize and Manning and Skubal to quote-unquote settle in, there's not a settle-in period anymore. This is a young person's game, and I really think we need to see some real signs of progress by the star prospects before the end of this year to really think that next year could look different than it does right now.
All right, final thing. You mentioned the rebuild didn't start till 17. You're kind of right because in 16 they were one game away from the playoffs, that last game in Atlanta. But, and this has to do with Avila, even way before this, well, he was actually working under Dombrowski. You can even go back. This organization has not developed any positional players of any note, and the few that they have, they made poor decisions on. Hindsight's 2020. They should have kept McCann, something like that. But shouldn't Avila be held accountable for what we see on the field from positional players, and more importantly, even in the farm system? And where are these international stars that I figured he'd be really good at getting? They're nowhere in this team.
Well, a couple things, Tony. I mean, number one, he did just get his contract extended in 2019, so I think as a practicality, he's got some time to show more production from the farm system. He has that ability. In terms of he has the wide berth, I think, by the ownership to let him see how things unfold for the next year plus. In terms of accountability, I don't think his job is in jeopardy. I really don't. And I think that when you consider the position player issue, I often go back and make this point, Stoney. The last position player drafted and developed by this team to make multiple All-Star appearances for the Tigers was Travis Fryman. Travis Fryman.
I know.
That's a long time, Stoney.
I know.
And so I think that it's been an issue. I'm actually going to drive over and watch Torkelson's debut, his home debut tonight. I'm curious to see how he looks because you look at it. I made the Kelenic comparison. He's older than Kelenic, basically, or they're basically the same age. I mean, this is the time to produce is here, and I really think that the time to measure Avila's tenure is probably in how ready this team is over the next year. I agree. The Verlander trade has not worked out well. I fully acknowledge that. But I think that we'll have a really good feel and probably a little better perspective on the totality of his tenure, I think, by around this time next year. But to the fans that are upset and impatient, I understand. But I think as a practicality, he has about another year plus to show some fruits from the farm system right now.